We have the mountains and the forests and the rivers and the valleys and the natural resources they contain. We have the natural resources, but the theme of my discourse is just how long will those resources all remain? If we study conservation and practice conservation, there's no doubt that it will keep our nation strong. It's my earnest observation that the anti-population join the chorus of the conservation song.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Theodore Roosevelt. For those of you who don't know me, I was the 26th president of these great United States. And I'm very happy to be here today, back in the West, back where I learned so much, made so many good friends. I owe a lot to the West. Turned me into the man I am today. Showed me the benefits of living a strenuous life. I'll never forget the first trip to the West. It was to the Dakota Badlands to hunt for my first buffalo. And the head of that beautiful beast is still one of my most treasured trophies at my ranch in the Dakotas at Elkhorn. I've had some bully good hunts out here in the West, some bully good hunts, like my first grizzly. What a bear! I cocked my rifle, stepped into the bushes, came face to face with that great beast. He was about 25 feet away, about 8 steps. We'd aroused him from his sleep with our approach, and he sat up in his lair and slowly turned his huge head toward us. By that time, we were so close it had to be a one-shot kill or we were going to be in big trouble. My face washed white, my stomach turned over, but the blue barrel of my rifle was as steady as a rock as I glanced along it till I could see the top of the bead rest fairly between his two sinister-looking eyes, and as I pulled the trigger, I jumped out of the way of the smoke just to be ready in case he charged. But it was needless, for I put that bullet exactly between his eyes, as if I'd measured the distance with a carpenter's rule. It was a bully good shot, bully good, one of my best, and that bear was almost 9 feet long, weighed over 1,000 pounds. I still think it is a better trophy and harder to get than my brother Eliot's African lion. Only he who has partaken thereof can understand the keen delight of hunting in lonely lands. For him is the joy of a horse well ridden, a rifle well held. For him the long days of hardship and toil, resolutely endured, but crowned in the end with triumph. And in after years there shall forever come to his mind the memories of endless prairies shimmering under the bright sun, or vast snow-clad wastelands lying desolate under gray skies, melancholy marshes, the rush of mighty rivers, the scent of evergreen forests in the summer, the crooning of ice-armored pines at the touch of the winds of winter, mighty cataracts roaring through hoary mountain masses, all the innumerable sights and sounds of the wilderness, its immensity, its mystery. The silences that brood in its still depths. And it was these memories that made me realize that we as a people, we as a nation, we as a government need to protect this wilderness and wildlife for our future generations. Many people have told me the greatest accomplishment in my life going to be the resources that I have saved due to my conservation efforts. I always thought that building the Panama Canal or ending the war between Japan and Russia, for which I was given a Nobel Peace Prize, or doubling the size of our Navy would be the things that I would be remembered for most. But it seems that the Forest Service and conservation are going to be my lasting legacy. And I don't mind. You see, I believe that when government and politicians speak of for the people, they must include the unborn people, as well as those people who now are alive. Otherwise, the democratic ideal is not fully realized, and I believe our founding fathers felt the same way too. Purpose of our government is to ensure its citizens, all of its citizens now and forever, their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we, of our generation, destroy all the resources from which our future generations are going to derive their livelihood, then we reduce the capacity of this continent to support a population, we degrade our present standard of living, and we deprive the future generations of their right to life on this continent. Ever since John Smith cut down those first trees in Jamestown back in 1607, America's ever-increasing population has considered its water, its soil, its forests, its animals, its minerals as inexhaustible, each generation thinking only of the present, never of the future, public welfare yielding to private interests. It wasn't until 1891 that something was finally done about this with the establishment of the Bureau of Forestry, which allowed the president to set aside forests in a national reserve. Up until that time, most Americans had but one thought when they saw a tree, and that was to cut it down, clear it away, build something with it, or burn it for fuel. When I became president in 1901, over half of all the timber in this country had been cut down. Tons of precious topsoil had been washed away, mountains of minerals had been mined and wasted, and many, many birds and animals had been hunted to near extinction. But fortunately, with the help of my friends from the Boone and Crockett Club, a sportsman's club named in honor of Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, and my Secretary of Interior, Gifford Pinchot, we were able to add over 150 million acres of timberland into our reserve, almost 3 times what had been set aside up until that time. Now, that doesn't mean that that land cannot be used and must be left untouched like a national park. It just means that there are now restrictions and rules to its use to safeguard waste and prevent permanent damage to the forest cover. Now, I know conservation means development just as much as it means protection, and I recognize the rights of this generation to develop and use their natural resources. But what I do not recognize is their right to waste them, or to rob by wasteful use of future generations to come. A grove of giant redwood trees should be kept like we keep an old and beautiful cathedral. Walking under those giant sequoias is like being in a temple built by God, a temple much grander than any human architect could by any possibility build. And that is why I support the preservation of those groves of giant trees, simply because it would be a great shame to our civilization to allow them to disappear. We are not building this country of ours to last for a day. We are building it to last forever. And it's the same with our wildlife. To lose a chance to see frigate birds circling above a storm, or a line of pelicans winging their way homeward across the crimson afterglow of a sunset, or to see a myriad of terns flashing in the bright light of the midday sun in an ever-changing maze above the beach. To lose these creatures would be like losing a magnificent gallery full of masterpieces created by ancient artists of old. Primitive man, pioneers, they felt no duty to the future. When the first American settlers cut down those forests in New England, they felt that there were plenty of forests left for their children who came after them. And when they exhausted the soil in their farms, they felt that their children could just move west and make new farms. And when that soil washed away from farms and choked the neighboring rivers with mud and silt, making navigation impossible, their only thought was to use the railroad instead of the rivers to move their produce and supplies. And that was all right for them and their immediate successors, but now all the land has been claimed. Now if a farmer wants to make a living on his farm, he must do it on his father's farm. And it is a poor farmer who skins that land and leaves it worthless to his children. However, it is a good farmer who uses that land to support himself and his family, provide an education for his children, and then leaves that farm to his heirs in a better condition than he himself found it. And I believe it should be the same for a nation as well. We have added enormous tracts of agricultural land to our national domain by irrigating many of the arid regions right here in the West and other projects created by our Reclamation Act of 1902. Farmers should be adding acreage to their farms, not washing them away. When I became president, over 3 million acres of land were being irrigated. And when I dedicated the Roosevelt Dam in Arizona last year, 1911, it created one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. We can capture all of that flood water and use it as a national resource rather than letting it run wasted to the ocean. And we can increase our transportation and conserve our coal and oil reserves by building canals on our rivers so as to create a great waterway from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes along the mighty Mississippi. If we can build the Panama Canal, we can certainly build great canals here in America. My conservation plan as president was threefold: reclaim land through irrigation, use and preserve our forests, and protect our wildlife. I knew that the fate of our wilderness and wildlife depended upon the intelligent education of the American people. Most Americans were unaware of how our resources were being destroyed and what it meant to future generations. So I took that information to the people, into the homes of every farmer and factory worker, merchants, professional people, every lover of nature, every person who appreciated the majesty and beauty of the wilderness. I told them they needed to shake hands with the far-sighted people who wish to preserve our wilderness and wildlife, and they needed to support them with their votes. And without that publicity, the Forest Service would never have survived the numerous attacks made upon it by the representatives of special interest groups lobbying in Congress. It seems I have had to battle special interest groups my entire career, from trust busting in my early presidential years to the party politics of these last few years. Our government must be freed from the sinister influence and control of special interest groups. Just as the special interests of cotton and slavery threatened our political integrity before the Civil War, so now too special interest groups too often control and corrupt the men and methods of government for their own profit. We are presently suffering from the tyranny of minorities. It is a small minority that is grabbing our coal deposits and our water powers and our harbor fronts. It is a small minority that chops down our forests and controls our transportation. And it is a small minority that lies behind monopolies and trusts. I believe in a pure democracy, that human rights are supreme above all other rights, and that wealth should be the servant of the people, not the master. And if people feel that judges have made decisions in defiance of justice, then they should have the right to bring those decisions to a vote. And if the court decision is not sustained by the voters, then that decision should be reversed. Our country, This great republic of ours means nothing unless it means the triumph of a real democracy, the triumph of a popular government, and in the long run, the triumph of an economic system which guarantees that each and every one of us is given equal opportunity to be the best that we can be. So, our task as Americans is to strive for social and industrial justice achieved through genuine popular rule. And to succeed, we need leaders of inspired idealism, leaders to whom are granted great visions, leaders who can dream greatly and strive to make those dreams come true, leaders who can kindle the people with the fire from their own burning souls. We cannot be a great nation unless we desire to be a great nation. The Panama Canal, our dams and reclamation projects, our huge naval fleet, they lead the world. And our leaders, whomever they may be, they must remember that they are but instruments, to be used until broken and then to be cast aside. And if they're worth their salt, they will care no more when they are cast aside than a soldier cares when he is sent to where his life is forfeit, so long as our victory may be won. In our long battle for righteousness, the watchword for us all should be spend and be spent. And it matters not whether one man succeeds or fails, so long as our cause does not fail. For it is the cause of all mankind. Justice for all, achieved through everyone's voice, through everyone's vote. We, here in America, hold in our hands the hope of the world, the fate of coming years, and shame and disgrace will be ours if in our eyes the bright light of high hope is dimmed, if we trail in the dust the golden dreams of all mankind, if on this new continent we merely build another country of great but unjustly divided material wealth, we will have done nothing. And likewise, if we merely set the greed of envy against the greed of arrogance, and thereby destroy the material wealth of us all, we will have done nothing. The worth of our great experiment as a nation depends upon its being in good faith an experiment in true democracy. Surely this is a noble ideal, an ideal for which to strive and sacrifice much, for our ideal is the rule of all people in the spirit of friendliest brotherhood toward each and every one of the people. When I first started my political career back in the 1880s, working for social and industrial justice, my attitude was that justice was handed down from above. But after my time spent out here in the West, after seeing life from many different points of view and dealing with justice as a group decision, because there were no judges to make rulings and hand down justice, I realized that democratic justice comes from all of us working together with our fellow citizens. We all know that there is an entirely too much social and industrial injustice in our world, and the only way we are going to change that is by working together. So, the conservation of our natural resources, of our wilderness and our wildlife depends on each and every one of us. It is the patriotic duty of each and every American to conserve our resources. Only when the people of this country consciously raise themselves up as citizens and as a nation to the highest pitch of excellence in their private and state and national lives, and do so because it is the right thing to do, then and only then will the future of this nation, in quality and in time, be assured. Only then will our experiment as a nation be lasting and worthwhile. We are not building this country of ours to last for a day. We are building it to last forever.
Let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave